Yeah, and the truth is that Amazonians love Momo, either directly or indirectly. You have Dr. Mungwa is married for Momo. A lot of people keep going to Momo one way or the other. So there are a lot of things happening in Momo. But like I told the officials of Mezam last week, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Much is
Our
expected.
intention
Absolutely.
with this
Absolutely.
discussion is not to indict any county, but to have very inclusive conversations that will help our think tanks to reconsider policy and collaboration. And I'm getting this back to you, Professor Tebo. You do not need to waste your time talking on these issues that the barristers would have talked on. But you, with your monologue, if I should call it, have proven that you understand the power of collaboration. And this is where I get back to you for you to be a little bit more specific. The openness of this county to see the strength, especially on the field. I know you've said you're being vigilant to work with other counties like Bui, like Manu. What are some of the things they would have employed? What are some of the lessons you would have learned from your mistake? We just heard Barrister Mbesi saying that all we Amazonians want is for Momoto said, yes, we failed somehow and we have reason to fall no more. What is the mindset of the leadership of this county vis-a-vis these struggles that we are discussing tonight? That should be your concluding statement. I need to release you as an official to go and begin the draft. Talk to us.
Okay.
That
Thank you
also is
so much.
important. The president's executive assistants. You Ambazonians, when they come, I just want to say this so that you don't forget it. It's very important. When Ambazonians come to draft any county, when the president calls them to draft any county, the Ambazonians are calculating one of three things or all. Number one, the relationship with that county and the federal government and the president. Number two,
Mhm.
the ability of the county to learn from their mistakes. Number three, their adherence to federal government's policies. So it's important that you address these issues now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Padi. I want to also take this moment to thank my co-panelists, Barrister Mfunso and Barrister Mbesa. I am usually humbled to be in your presence, but I sit here today um, not only as a daughter of Momo County and Mogamo LGA in particular, but also as the executive assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. And so I'm really at the intersection of all things that are related to the struggle. And so what I say here today is in that dual capacity or triple capacity. But I want to address what Barrister Mbesa said, um, that you want a promise or a guarantee from us. I can tell you now that we are 100% ready for collaboration because we did it in the past. What derailed us was all the infiltration by ADF that convinced some people to go after our ASAs. Unfortunately, I can also um, blame some of our own Momo County citizens because, like they say in my village, a witch cannot enter your house if you did not allow them to enter. And let me say it in Mogamo. Choi ijuk ye kurungwane nganab ni cheze bobo. Very important. So for someone to know where your house is, to know where you've kept your sacred pot of cash or snuff, an insider, somebody from within your compound or your house must have told them. And so it is very important for Momo County to also take responsibility for their own errors of the past, because part of it and part of our failures, part of our pain and suffering was caused by our own people who are joining La Republique or joining ADF to create the mayhem that we saw. Luckily for us, I am also very happy to say that that has changed drastically. We saw what happened in EY, that more than 8 of those stocks were neutralized. 8 of those stocks were neutralized in one day. Now, if we're going to bring the federal government, because also when I'm talking, people are looking at me like, this is the president's executive assistant. What happened in AY was phenomenal, but the federal government did not have a role to play in it. To tell you that Mogamo, LGA, and Momo citizens rise up when they need to rise up. And so it will be very important for our federal government to also support in those things. And that is what the federal government is doing now. That is why we drafted the federal government. And now we're drafting counties so that when emergencies and things like that, or other last minute things that come up, the federal government is not running around trying to squeeze money from poor counties or counties that are already struggling with the stocks and La Republic agents. And so it's very important that the collaboration that we seek is meticulously programmed
Enhance.
and implemented at the LGA county and federal government level so that it runs smoothly. And so that way, we don't have anyone saying, oh, we drafted this and we drafted that, and we've never received any help. That is our goal now. And so we
Yeah, yeah.
have reason to fall no more. And the federal government is on track, doing everything to make sure that we carry out the plans
Professor
of the
Tebow,
government.
Professor Tebow, I know
Yes.
you are rushing to go, but you've just said something there that has helped me to ask this. Do you think that uh, prior to this thing in Ewa, we call it Ewa,
EY,
AY.
yes.
why,
Yes,
why,
EY, yes.
at that given moment was the platform really created for the county leadership to effectively work with federal government, because I think if the federal government it has a good platform to work with a county, they'll be actively involved to enhance things like that, because that is actually the role of the federal government. Moving forward, is Momo County actually creating that firm platform where federal government and state
Absolutely.
are effectively implemented?
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's partly because of the failure of chasing out ADF and
Yeah,
allowing ADF sit in Momo for 2, 3, 4 years that the federal government realized the need
yeah,
for a federal draft, because before we were drafting counties.
yeah,
And so when you draft counties and there's an emergency, it means you have to go to this county and go to that county or call on other people. We have, diplomatic groups, we have other groups, and all those groups, Mogamo people have been the ones sponsoring all those groups because they're like the go-to guy to call in case of emergency. And so it was important to have the federal government draft so that we can take care of other things and not count on counties only that are also struggling, because that struggle to oust ADF and Republic agents was throughout Amazonia, but it was more emphasized in Momo County and especially in Mogamo LGA, where they supposedly had their headquarters right next to Tiben, where there was a B head office right there. And those
yeah,
boys never fought the bees, but they would go
yeah,
and harass people and collect taxes and do all kinds of
yeah,
things to the point of even killing a prince. Unfortunately for them, it's the same people who now, under pressure, flipped, because that is what La Republic does. They use you, they squeeze everything out of you, and then when they realize that you may give out their secrets, they killed you. And that is
Yeah.
how the so-called big number, or whatever they call his name, and the gang that had settled in EY
Mm-hmm.
were summarily neutralized.
Neutralize.
And so what I'm saying is that with projects like that, covert action like that, Momo is rising to fall no more. And so Barrister May said, don't worry, that collaboration is firm. I can guarantee you. I know I will take this to my people and they'll be like, oh, why did you say it? Oh, you didn't. But I know that they will agree because that is what we've been discussing. And so rest assured that that collaboration will work out so well, and that
Thank
now
you
at
very much.
county level, federal government is also involved because that is
Yeah.
part of why we draft the federal government. So we don't let the federal government become a beggar every day, you know.
I'm very happy with what you have said, but I'm coming to you. I'm going to release her to go now so that you can coordinate some things in the
No,
county.
before
I
she
know you're
goes,
And before
okay,
I
please.
go, you know, I just want to say that um outings like this allow us to vent, but also to bring together
Yeah,
people who may be sitting on the fence, people who may still not understand what is going on. This is
yeah,
an existential fight that we have. We are fighting to assert our sovereignty. We already had independence in 1961. And so this assertion of sovereignty is within the right of self defense and self determination. So no one can fault us. And that is partly why sometimes we get upset at the UN or all these Western governments who pretend not to know what is going on, because
yeah,
they are treating us like the poor orphans. Whereas the same
yeah,
thing that happened to Ukraine, they're pumping money in Ukraine, they're pumping money even in Israel and Palestine, all of that. And they're looking at us as if, we are the problem. And so I want to conclude by saying there can be no justification for injustice. And that is
yeah,
why we are here drafting. And that is
yes,
why we have to continue drafting. We have to fight for our rights. We have to fight for our self defense and self determination. And that is why we all have to come out and draft for Momo County. And I'm calling on all the Mogamo sons and daughters. But you, Tiani Jambi, Biga, me yi ya ma biri chugu ma ni ngak sham ma ne ma bit but yet ma biri one. Thank you, sir.
thank you very, very much. Barrister Fruit, speak. I wanted to do a music transition before we conclude, but
just like Barrister Ambassador said, Momo should write and pour no more. But
Yes.
I want to emphasize to Professor Tebow that incident of the a public execution of our two young men
I
in
was
Guzan
about coming.
In Guzan, yes.
remains a pain in our heart. That is something that is something that the LGA should work on. And I don't know whether these people have been held accountable or it just died a natural death.
Oh no,
No, thank you
part
very
of the
much.
gang, part of the gang that was executed in EY,
Yeah,
that young man who pulled the trigger in Guzan was one of them. And so
Mm.
that person is gone. But it still begs the question, how could that even happen? And that was happening in a public square, harassing people. And
that's unfortunate.
it, it's very unfortunate. The trauma that Momo people have gone through, the trauma that Mogamo people have undergone, because even when those two kids were killed in front of everybody, there was such trauma. And
Yeah,
then when they couldn't even collect the corpse of big number who was dumped at that same spot where they had killed the two boys.
yeah.
The cops stayed there for days, polluting the environment.
That could be
Police brought the
very.
cops and dumped there, you know, to tell you that Midland Zone is the political center of this struggle, is the heartbeat of politics in this country. And whatever happens there affects the entire nation. And
Yeah.
so
Correct.
we want to make sure that people remember that, because sometimes, I'm glad Barrister brought that up. Sometimes people forget so quickly, but those are things that should not even be happening. If we remember those two boys, we remember the more than 50,000 people who have been killed, the more than 500 villages that have been burnt, the over 1 million people displaced internally and externally, the more than 1.5 million kids of school age who cannot go to school, not through any fault of ours. They cannot go to school in a war zone, given that the protection of schools is non-existent. And so all those things are motivation for us to do everything to draft so that we can end this struggle sooner than later. We deserve our independence. Our people deserve peace and quiet so that they can live a good life. So again, we want to draft, draft, and draft because our life depends on it. Thank you.
That's amazing.